Hello, it's me again for the third video that I've filmed today. Let's go. You know, when you have the house to yourself and the energy slash lack of depression, you gotta seize them when you can. So I uploaded my July wrap up about 2 days ago as I'm filming this, which means it is now time to do my August wrap up because I was stupid late with that one. Let's talk about all the books I read in August. It was 6, the vast majority of which came at the very beginning of the month, because I was feeling organised and reading then, and then I went to Edinburgh for 2 weeks and I didn't do any reading at all until the very end. So it was a bit of a weird month, but I read some Booker books, I read some women in translation books. That's the 2 kinds of books I read. So let's just get into it. First up, I listened to the audiobook, I think, yes I did, of The Trees by Percival Everett. This is longlisted for this year's Booker Prize, and it was pretty good. It was pretty good. So essentially, this is it's a kind of murder mystery detective type novel, or at least starts off that way, where some people have been murdered, and they've been murdered in a very specific way, and then you find out that they are some very specific people, and they might be being murdered for a very specific reason. All of the reasons and who they are and everything is given away pretty much on the blurb and most descriptions that I've seen of the book, but I'm like, a lot of it doesn't come in until quite late on, I felt. So it kind of feels like, you know exactly what's going on, and all of the characters and everyone are like, what the hell is this? This is madness. And you're like, it's on the blurb, mate. Like, come on, figure it out. So if you can go into this knowing absolutely nothing, it's probably better. This is a kind of satirical, kind of comedy book about racism and lynchings. Comedy. It's not afraid to poke fun at this kind of tiny town in Mississippi where it's set, all the kind of, white characters. There is some excellent Trump parody in this that is like painful, how accurate it is, and it kind of, yeah, it's entertaining, and I think does what it set out to do really well. I do think it gets a bit long and starts dragging quite a lot in the middle section, because you do spend quite a long time with everyone going, oh my god, there's all these murders, people are being murdered, oh no. And it's like, are you going to do something about it? Are you going to connect any of these dots? Because like, we already know what's going on because we read the blurb, and it kind of gets a bit repetitive. But having said that, the last, like, maybe, I don't know, 5th is amazing and incredibly powerful. Once I figured out exactly what was going on, I was like, oh man, that is something. And the very last section is like, really hits you. I didn't like love all the kind of satire stuff. I did find it entertaining, but it just wasn't kind of my thing. But otherwise, it's pretty solid, and I would recommend it if it sounds like something you'd be interested in. Then I read Our Lady of the Nile by Scholastique Mukasonga, which is translated by Melanie Mauthner, I want to say. I did this as a buddy read with at Booksaurus on Instagram. I can't remember their exact Instagram handle, but I will put it here somewhere. This is about a girls' school in Rwanda in, I think, like 1978, something like that, late 1970s, early 1980s. And it basically follows some girls in this school, but it's written in a very interesting way, in that it's almost like every chapter is a short story and they're all kind of interlinking. And to me, it felt like the characters are sort of more like storytellers rather than meant to represent like actual people. It's very difficult to describe. Like, I haven't read a book like this before. It's written in a very interesting way and I really, really loved it. It took me a while to get into it and realise that, like, okay, these characters are not going to feel like real people, but instead you get this kind of like immensely rich like idea of the setting and the landscape and also the different dynamics that these girls have, because it's kind of, it is obviously set in a time which is kind of before the Rwandan genocide, but it kind of takes all of those sort of like dynamics that then led up to the genocide and kind of puts them in this sort of microcosm of the school and explores the way in which like hate was building up, and how it was enabled by external like people like missionaries and kind of teachers and all that kind of stuff. Like it's so interesting. I would advise against going into this not knowing anything about the Rwandan genocide. It's definitely worth like reading up about like on Wikipedia or anything, like having a broad overview of it before you go in. And yeah, I found it incredibly powerful and really, really amazing. Like, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. Again, it took me a while to get into it and figure out what it was doing, but once I kind of got into the groove of it and just let it do what it was doing instead of what I was expecting it to be doing, it was that genuinely scared the shit out of me and took me quite a while to realise what it was. I'm gonna go get the door. Apologies if the frame has moved. I probably kicked the chair that I'm using as a tripod when I got up, but all is well. Yes, I would really, really recommend Our Lady of the Nile. It's great. Read it. It's good. I then read Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk, translated by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. I listened to the audiobook of this, which is also narrated by Antonia Lloyd-Jones, and she does an amazing job. Like, it is a great audiobook. This is actually another book, which is a kind of murder mystery, but not really about the murders kind of book. So it's about an old woman who lives in a very remote kind of village, and one of her neighbours dies mysteriously. Then some other people kind of start dying. But it's very, very, very slow. Like, very slow. Very, 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 very slow. And it's not very plotty. However, you spend most of the time, / all the time, because she's the narrator, in this main character's head. And you really get to know like her thought processes. Do you mind? And all of her like quirks, of which she has quite a few. Really good like character study, unreliable narrator who you kind of get the idea that she is not telling you everything, but also she's telling you a lot of stuff, and you're kind of like, who are you telling this to? Who am I in this situation? Are you writing a book? Like, what's going on? Other interesting characters. It's very funny as well. I found it really funny. It's very entertaining, but also sad. I don't know, it's just good and I think you should read it. Next, I read Where the Wild Ladies Are by Matsuda Aoko, which is translated from Japanese by Polly Barton. This is a collection of short stories which are like retellings of Japanese ghost stories, and I enjoyed it. So I was expecting this to be like creepy, and ghost stories in the sense of, you know, like scary ghosts. However, it's not really that, which is fine. It just took me a little while to like adjust to the different tone that it was setting, that I wasn't expecting. Lots of the stories are like kind of little like quirky slice of life type stories that happen to involve ghosts, or are kind of inspired by ghost stories in some way, even if they don't actually have ghosts in. There are a couple which are kind of more creepy, but a lot of them are also just like kind of a bit weird and unsettling, or just not creepy at all and actually quite warm and like fun. Also, there are some which are interlinked, which I wasn't expecting. This is one of those books that I enjoyed it while I was reading it, but I really cannot remember many of the stories now, like at all, which is a shame. I think it's definitely interesting, and I like I say, I liked it. I liked it for introducing me to different ghost stories and different aspects of Japanese culture, but it wasn't really anything particularly impactful or anything that will stick with me. I then read Elena Knows by Claudia Pineiro, translated by Frances Riddle. So this was long-listed / shortlisted, I think, for the International Book of this year. I've been really meaning to read it for a long time, and I really enjoyed it. I started reading this a while ago, and then stopped for various reasons. I just wasn't in the mood for it, but I started it again on the coach up to Edinburgh, and I read the entire thing in the space of a few hours on the coach, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. Apologies if the lighting and the frame have changed dramatically. My phone died. I was talking about Elena Knows. Ooh, basically I loved it. It's great. So it follows a woman called Elena, whose daughter has just died. Everyone says it's a suicide, but Elena knows that it was not, and she is determined to prove that it wasn't, and because she is her daughter's mother and she knows what she would have done and not done, and she knows that this was not a suicide, but no one's listening to her, so she decides to go and seek out somebody who owes her and her daughter a favour from years ago. So she goes and finds this person, except Elena also has Parkinson's, so that is why she needs that's why she needs somebody to help her. So a lot of this book is about her experience with Parkinson's and being dependent on other people or medication to move around and to live, and kind of the terrifying prospect of what is going to happen to her now that her daughter is dead and she doesn't really have anyone else to look after her. But it's also kind of just like a mystery about like what happened to her daughter. Most of the time though, you spend inside Elena's head, and you learn more about her relationship with her daughter. It's very much about like mothers and daughters, obviously, and like how well you can know a person, and how possible it is to completely know somebody. Yeah, I found this book really powerful. It's incredibly well written, and it's very slow because Elena is disabled, and so she is very much like the way that time works for her is very much dependent on her medication and her mobility, and also she's very aware of time and how it passes differently. It's really interesting, and I would really recommend it if you haven't read it already. And then finally, I read Case Study by Graeme Macrae Burnet, which is another one that's been longlisted for the Booker Prize this year. This is about a woman who believes that a famous psychiatrist it's set in like the 1960s. She believes that this famous psychiatrist drove her sister to kill herself, basically, and because she read about her sister as one of the case studies in this psychiatrist's book. I say psychiatrist, but he's not really. he's sort of considered to be like a fraud by lots of people because he is essentially not a qualified doctor, but lots of people go to him to kind of have, you know, therapy, and she ends up kind of theoretically like trying to go undercover to kind of sort of figure out who he is and what happened to her sister. So I really like this book. I don't think it is like exceptional in any way, but again, I read pretty much all of it on the coach ride back from Edinburgh. I read pretty much nothing in between in those 2 weeks. But yeah, it kept me entertained, it kept me interested for the whole time. Obviously it's very psychological, so you get really into the narrator / main character's head, and her kind of experiences of supposedly like going undercover to go to her appointments with this psychologist, and then how that kind of affects her, you know, her mentally. You also get chapters of the psychologist's life, which I found really interesting. Not everyone loves those parts, but I think they were interesting, and he is an awful person, but very entertaining to read about. I think as like the creation of some really interesting characters, it is very good. It's nothing like that I'll be shouting about from the rooftops. I think it was really good and I enjoyed it, but again, it's one that I'd be like surprised if it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. But who knows? Who knows what could happen? Anyway, I've been filming for long enough, and I want a cup of tea, so I'm gonna go. But thank you very much for watching. If you've read any of these books that I've read in August, let me know and we can talk about them, because you know I love a talk in a comment. I love it. Yeah, let me know how you're doing, and I will see you very, very soon.